Clifton, thank you so much for joining us on the Ops Drop today. For those of you who don't know, Clifton is a VP at Gartner. And Clifton, you've been in product in like multiple different capacities for over 20 years now.
Yep.
Before product was product,
Before, well, I don't
Clifton
know
was product.
before, but yeah, no, I started back in the early 2000s with a legal tech company. I'm actually a lawyer by training. Uh,
I was
I,
going to, you know what? Let's talk about that, Clifton. We're gonna talk about your product's hot take, but also like you're a lawyer. When I was
yes.
looking at your LinkedIn, I'm like, this is a man of many skills. So tell me about you were a lawyer and then you're like, all right, let's do product.
Yeah, it gets even weirder. I'm a psych social major as well, so I have no technical degree at all. I have no technical training. I should have gone into software engineering and then become a patent attorney and
Yeah.
retired 15 years ago, but that's not
But here we are.
not the way life went for me. So yeah, no, I went to law school. Always wanted to be a prosecutor of all things, and some things happened around the time I finished law school, and I got hooked up with the legal technology field.
Yeah.
I did a lot of work in e-discovery and court record retrieval back in the days when things were just starting to become electronic, which is shocking that I'm talking about the 2000s and things just starting to become electronic, but that's the legal system for you. And yeah, after a few years doing kind of second tier, third tier support, I wound my way into product because it looked like a
Yeah.
place where people make decisions and people have to follow those decisions. And then I learned that you didn't actually make the decisions, but you facilitated the decisions.
You kind of
I fell
influence
in
a
love
bit.
with them. I mean, the complexity, the inner workings, the dynamics of working within organizations, that's what drew me to the profession. And that's
Yeah.
kind of I guess the theme that's gone throughout my career is coming into organizations that are struggling with product management practices and kind of upskilling them, leveling them up, maturing them.
Right.
And that's what I do now at Gartner, as kind of a consultation analyst type role, working with large enterprise and small enterprise product teams. So um, I guess I was destined to be what I am today.
It is. Whether it's destiny or not, we're here. No, that's an incredible journey so far. So look, you've been in product forever since, leaving the legal field. And I want to start off with like, what is your hottest product management take?
Yeah, I think there's two. I think one's been beaten to death a little bit over the past year or so after my
Yeah.
presentation at Industry about product owners and product managers. I love Marty Kagan. I love the concepts of product-led organizations. I love everything most of the things he says, but that one really that his reluctance to admit that product owners scale has been a problem for me. And I look back at my career and I see that I was trying to be that unicorn purple squirrel product manager doing everything from birth to death. And when I look back at my own career, I didn't do all of that great. It wasn't the best thing for the products that I was working with, the companies I was working with. And after taking my job here at Gartner, I've talked with thousands of product teams
Yeah.
that at scale struggle to do the discovery, the validation, the strategic stuff that they need to do, and manage the delivery, the execution, the tactical side of things. And we see this in our data. I've become kind of known as the guy that brings data to the product conversations.
Right.
Like 30% of product managers tell us that they spend too much time working with engineering, and almost the exact same percentage say they spend too little time doing discovery and validation. So this isn't
Every
shocking.
company, every company,
Every company does this.
every
It's
company. So I'm like, when are we gonna stop the insanity circle and fix it?
exactly. And that's what the product owner role lets you do is, we kind of have this thumb in the air rule of one product manager can really support only three development teams if they're doing agile scrum, ending their sprints on the same day. That just, that's every second Friday, you've got 9 hours of meetings,
Right.
right? An hour of planning, an hour of retro, an hour of demo for each of the teams. You get overloaded every third Friday, not to mention all the other stuff you're doing with grooming and with, refinement, doing with refinement and doing with the daily stand-ups and things like that. If we add just one product owner,
Yep.
we get 1 to 1 to 3. But if we add three product owners, we get a 1 to 3 to 9 ratio. And that just makes sense to me. There are definitely challenges. This isn't to say like just drop a product owner in and make it all magic, because if a product owner is working in a silo, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Have to, I want us to reinvent the idea of product management as a team, not a person. It's a product team. There's a product manager that does the strategic stuff. There's a
Right.
product owner that does the tactical stuff. There's a product ops person that does the supporting,
Yep.
the operational, the tools, the process, the communications. And there might be other roles. And I just wrote a research note about this based on presentation I gave at Pandemonium last year, talking about it as a team sport, as we're trying to make sure that people understand that you might need a security person on your team, might need it full time.
Right.
You
Why
might,
is there that resistance though? Like, why is that? It's like we have this model. It's a PM, an EM, a designer, and then engineers, and
and the
that's
trios, the
it.
trio's becoming a quad, and the quad's becoming a quint, and the quint's becoming a
Right.
sextuple. Like we shouldn't be thinking in a limited scope of these are the three people that are essential for X, Y, or Z for every organization,
Right.
because that doesn't work. But we should be thinking of what is that team for my organization to
For
do.
my organization, what
And
works for us?
exactly. If you're an API heavy company, it may not make sense to have a UI designer as part of your trio. If you're a UX heavy company, it absolutely is required to have that. Um, I think people are in love with the chaos.
Mhm.
This is the conclusion I've come to after a
Okay.
bunch of stuff on LinkedIn and talking with people. As much as we say, and this is the psychologist in me, right? There's the espouse theory and the theory and practice, the thing
Mhm.
you say and the thing you really do. We say that we want product management to be a profession. Now, for it to be a profession, it has to have guide rails. It has to have specific duties, specific tasks. Marketing is a profession. Sales is a profession. There's very, very clear guidelines. People understand when you say, I'm a salesperson, they understand basically what you do.
They definitely understand like the metric that you own.
Right, exactly. But on the other
They
hand,
understand the day to day. Yeah.
every time someone tries to make progress toward defining that, there was a book of knowledge thing that went out a couple years ago. There's been some product management manifestos over the past 10 years or so. A few of them have tried. They just die on the vine because no one wants to actually give up those fun things that they're doing that they would have to in order to be a profession, right? When product management fills the gaps, those gaps become the job. And when we think about if there's gaps in marketing, product management filling those gaps, marketing needs to fill those gaps. If your engineering team isn't performing, that's not product's job to make it happen. That's the engineering's job, engineering team's job, engineering management's job to make sure they're delivering. Why are product managers being project managers when the engineering team should be their own project manager?
Well, yeah, I guess that's our question to you. Like, why do you think that's tell me what you think. You've
Man,
clearly sat and thought about these things. I agree with you with the love of chaos, the product. I mean, look, I have product managers that I work with that are also like setting up process and all. I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, this is not part of the scope of the thing. I mean, Darren, you're in RevOps, right? I doubt there's like tons of salespeople cluttering to build process for sales as much. Like, I don't, right? Like,
Oh, yeah. Honestly, it's everybody kind of fears process on the sales side for the most part, right? It's
yeah.
because you lose flexibility and
Yep.
mobility. At least that's how they perceive it, right? And I think, I love what you're saying, Clifton, about, making sure that you keep the right stuff in the right part and you have the right jobs associated with the right people so you're not overburdening somebody's thought process. So they have the time to focus on what really matters. I think the part that doesn't make sense to me, which is really hard for me to wrap my head around, is you have other things around like okay, product marketing, right? That might sit in marketing, and you're going to have the enablement piece that sits in other areas. Maybe it's in the revenue enablement. How do you work across those silos, those other teams, to make sure that you're working effectively? And then, do you find that's still a really beneficial relationship and it's working in that way, or do you feel like there's still a little bit of a power struggle with people wanting to hold on to some of that fun creative stuff?
I think there's always going to be a struggle when you're asking people to let go of something that they love. And why, how product got here is both a matter of history and a matter of personality, right? The types of people that become product managers want to solve problems.
Right.
Now, we want them to solve customer problems, but the mindset of solving customer problems leads them to try to solve the internal problems as well.
Sure.
And we tend to be, as a whole, the kind of person that doesn't want to sit back and say, hey, marketing, fix your crap, right? We want to fix that for marketing, or we want to fix that for sales. We want to fix that for engineering, because we either don't trust that they're going to do it right, which is often the case. We actually know how to solve the problem and they don't, right? There's knowledge, there's tribal knowledge, there's process knowledge that we can bring that other people don't have, or we just know it's not going to happen, right? I've been in organizations where I've delegated sprint management to the teams and watched it just completely collapse and nothing ever gets done. So that's kind of the personality side. The history is product management started as a gap filling role.
Right.
And we
Right.
will always be that to some degree, because we don't have direct authority to make things happen. Product never makes something happen specifically directly by saying, hey, go do this. We act through influence. And this is the hardest part of protecting or defining, or even, I guess, defending the existence of product, because it's a glue job. It's a facilitation job. It's the alignment job of making sure that marketing is doing the right things and sales is doing the right things and engineering is doing the right things, and providing that framework of, these are the problems that we're solving.
Yeah.
This is how we're going to solve them, and then aligning everyone around that to actually make it happen. And I've said many times, you can have a really crappy product team with a really great sales team and have a successful product. Vice versa, you can have a really crappy product, really great product team with a really terrible marketing or sales team, and it doesn't matter. It won't hit the market and it won't be successful.
Right.
So I struggle often with the challenge of managing that glue relationship without filling the gaps of where things are falling apart.
Yeah. And where it comes up to a lot of like what we're usually training out of teams too is like the product managers, the PR for the team, and not just the PR. They are like, if we set goals for some reason, it's like, oh, that's the PM's goal. And we're like, no, dog, like that's PM, EM, designer. Like that's all
Yes.
of you are in charge of making sure that this product is successful and people are engaging with it and, you know, continuing to optimize and own it. And I'm curious to hear, like, Clifton, if that's what you're seeing as well, or if that's what's turning up in your research. And like, I think we see how that impacts PMs because
Mhm.
it's they're exhausted and burnt out. But like, I'm curious that I'm like, what are the other parties doing and thinking then?
I think it's really interesting because each relationship kind of has its own nuances and its own challenges,
Mhm.
right? So I'm a firm believer in empowering dev teams with more information about users, more information about markets,
Yeah.
more information about problems. I want them to solve 50% of their questions before they even turn to a product owner or product manager,
Yeah.
right? That's ideal. Is we treat engineering like it's a factory line. You know, we give them the requirements, we wait 6 weeks, and we see if they've delivered on the requirements. And whether you do those as user stories, whether you do that iteratively, with how you communicate the requirements actually doesn't matter. It's how you're enabling them to solve the problems or not. Are they just taking a user story, delivering that user story, and moving on? Or are they actually asking questions like, hey, this user is highly technical or low technical. I need to know that so that I know what approach to make. And that's where the trio, quad, whatever approach kind of helps, because we get that ahead of time. But I think we spend so much time still doing what's the equivalent of big upfront requirements, even though we don't call them that anymore, that we're not really engaging with the team to empower them to do the work that they need to do. Sales and marketing are a totally different story, right? They're often driven by metrics that they know about and don't communicate well to us. So we don't understand what they're trying to achieve. And they may be at odds with what we're trying to achieve. So there's a huge amount of just goal level alignment, like
Yeah.
understanding sales. Are you trying to drive, what kind of revenue are you trying to drive? They're always trying to drive revenue, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of
Yep.
their job. But what
Yeah.
kind of revenue? Are we talking long term? Are we talking short term? Are we talking renewals versus net new? All of these things help me to understand what I'm trying to do and align my business goals.
I love that you're talking about sharing metrics across the department because I think like a big play for like a revenue, like a best-in-class revenue operation structure is about like exposing metrics and having that really clear across the organization, right? One thing that I've always seen working with either product managers or engineers, it could be different in each company. There's always a reluctancy to commit to a date, like a deliverable date, right? And I don't think any
What are
company
you
is
talking
like
about? I've
isolated
never
from
seen this. I've never seen that.
So it's all about like obviously you referenced, sales marketing, they care about the revenue because they're going to be held to a number. Oftentimes that comes from like early stage annual planning where you put together a target and that target sometimes is based and baked on new development that's going to be put through.
Yep.
And in order to get that new development in the planning process, you might have to dictate that we're going to go live on this date. We're going to have like the collateral ready by this date so you can start, whether it's vaporware or not, start communicating to the prospects and customer base to be able to offer that product and be able to deliver on those revenue targets by the time that you're expecting it. If you're thinking about like, I'd love to get your wisdom on this because like if I'm thinking about the best way to get those teams to work together, it's kind of like trying to hold water in your hands, right? When you're saying, "Hey, I need the engineering team to give me a date." The product managers are really trying to make sure they guide everything and get it the right place. They're working with the product marketers to get the right information to them so that they can develop the right content for go live. Like, what's the best way that you've seen to integrate all that into like a seamless experience for everyone to kind of hit their stride to deliver the right increments?
And is
So
this another case for POs? Because I feel
yeah, exactly. I think
Right?
POs are a big part of that challenge. The real fundamental mind shift that has to happen, and I've seen this happen in a couple of organizations, and it was amazing, is marketing and sales need to understand what an estimate is versus what a commitment is. And understand that there is a cone of uncertainty that when we start something, we don't know everything about that. And we can't. It is impossible in software and hardware development to know everything up front. So we have to start from that understanding. And then we need to build out that, okay, our first estimate before we start work is just that. It's a wild ass guess pulled out of our butts based on either everything going perfectly smoothly or everything going wrong.
Mhm.
And once I had a team that I finally just sat down with the CMO and had this conversation. I was like, look, the reason we're quote unquote missing dates is partially because we're adding scope, but that's not the problem, right? We can manage that. But also because you're asking us 9 months in advance when something's going to be released, and we don't know that. And they were like, but you give us the blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, we give you numbers because you demand it and the CEO demands it, and we can make up numbers till the cows come home. The trick that we got to was building a collaborative experience across the breadth of product development. So when we started, we think this is, plus minus 2 months, going to be ready in April. Cool. Now we ask marketing and sales around that April timeframe, what's critical? What's key? What do you need? And when do you need it? Well, we've got an event in March. Okay, cool. It won't be ready in March. We're not going to be able to cut time on it.
Yeah.
What do you need for March? And kind of having that negotiation. So it's not that, as of this date, everything needs to be done. It's a progressive build to getting there. Because, people talk about the time, scope, quality pyramid. It's not time, scope, quality. It's time and scope. If you set time, you can't set scope. And if you set scope, you can't set time. So you need to be able to negotiate that throughout the process. Once the marketing team kind of got online and we were able to also get sales online with that concept, they started creating the collateral months before.
They're like, oh, actually, it's just 3 Figma files.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
outlines, right? You can create the outlines. You can the basic functionality isn't going to change. So you can write the user guide practically 3 months before it's ready to go. And then you just slot in the videos or the screenshots, right? There was a culture change that had to happen within those teams to embrace the agile approaches that we were doing in development. And that's a big thing that people miss is agile is not just a development change. It impacts every single piece of the company, from finance to support to implementation to IT. everything has to change a little bit and accept that uncertainty. We can lie to ourselves about knowing when something's going to release as much as we want. But the reality is, and if you get the irony here is if you get people into a room and you talk to them directly, they'll all nod their heads and be like, yeah, no, we get that. And then 2 weeks later, they're telling customers that that feature will be delivered on April 24th, 2025. And you're like, wait, we just had that conversation. And it's fascinating to me, but that's the key piece. And that's where people struggle with agile transformations. That's where people struggle with growth transformations. Like all of these plateaus that startup companies hit, they hit because of an inability to change the culture. They don't hit because they're struggling in the market or they can't find product market. You found product market fit once. You can find product market fit again. You just have to do it a little bit differently at a little bit different scale.
I like you said that pressure really does motivate people to do things. Like you think about like the executive team, they're constantly pushing because they're getting pressure from the board.
Yep.
You get the sales team, they're pushing you because they're getting pressure from the executive team. And it's like, stuff rolls downhill, but it's mostly motivated by pressure, I think. Yeah. I think it's spot on.
And what I've learned over time is you have to figure out what's motivating the person you're trying to change.
Yep.
Right? You have to know what's driving them, because if you don't understand that, you're just asking them an abstract concept. And people don't deal well with abstract concepts in application. They can understand them. They can nod their head like product-led organization. Of course, we want to be a product-led organization.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to, but that means we have to talk to customers. I was like, whoa, hang on. I don't know about talking to people. Can't we use Gen AI for that? Can't we use agentic AI to do that for us? So I think that finding that motivation, finding out where that pressure point is, what it is that makes them want to do better, and then showing them, demonstrating, like, if we do this differently, this will make your job easier.
Right.
People love it when you make their jobs easier. When you can get the trains running on time as a product manager, you eventually wind up losing your job if you're like me. But the seamlessness of how things move and how things flow and how everything just kind of runs is absolutely amazing, if you can get to that state. But
Right.
it's a tough state to get to, and I think it's the job of product management to influence the culture and change the way people do things.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, Clifton, because like my extremely hyperbolic take is that product teams have never operated worse than they are right now because we're in this like post ZERP era, because there's like less money flowing, because we have these very distributed, teams, and there's a lot of, clash that can happen much more easily with that. And I see a lot of teams, like product teams, just under a pile of outputs and under like, the go-to-market teams, demanding, as Darren stated, the deadlines. The sort of like intolerance has actually built up, in my point of view, over time with the like age of agile, and like, it being okay that only 1 in 20 bets lands, right? And like it almost feels like product teams are operating worse because it's like, hey, time is up actually. And
Yep.
like your bets better matter, and you better be thinking about ROI and impact, which I think is a very good thing, right? But because of it, like we're in this age of transition and everybody seems to be really struggling and really uncomfortable. So like the seamlessness that you're describing, I'm not like seeing as much as I did back in the day. So I'm curious to hear like your take on that, and maybe what you think the future holds, or like how teams can deal with this, and maybe even like lean in, so it's not even just dealing, like where they can work their best and be their happiest in this sort of like environment.
Yeah, I think there's two things that led to the whatever situation it is we're in product right now. I don't
Yeah.
even know how to describe it really. One is leadership. We run across all the time people who are in product leadership roles who have absolutely zero product management experience.
Yeah.
They've come from a CMO role, then now they're magically the CPO, or they were everywhere but product for some reason.
Yeah.
And if you have leaders running an organization who haven't done the job, they can't advocate for the proper role.
They don't know what good looks like.
They don't know what good looks like.
Yeah.
Also, those, even when we do have product leaders, the way people learn product is by doing. And typically they only do that in 1 or 2 companies, maybe 3. I think I'm on the outlier of, think including Gartner, I'm at 8 or so. But people that come from a limited exposure think that their limited exposure is the universe.
Yes, yes.
We
It's like
see
that,
this-
you haven't had enough reps.
Exactly. And you can read Hagen, you can read Teresa, you can read Melissa, you can read all of these books all you want. But if you haven't actually seen any of those things work, you're just trying to take the ivory tower mentality and just make it magically happen. You need to know what those connective tissues are. You need to know what the steps in the process are. It's actually how I describe what we do here at Gartner with the product team solution is we help try to bring people along to move that needle to go from 0 to 10 or 10 to 20 or 20 to 30, because that's a huge amount of improvement. You can't go from 0 to 100. So I think there's a leadership problem. The second one is I think there's a complacency problem. I think during the ZERP era, people just got used to being able to be delivery oriented, not really talk to customers, and just punch out a bunch of features. And if 1 out of 10 features hits, then that's a success. And we're not being held to account for it. Those days are gone, and people have to adjust to like you're saying, your bets now matter. So in order for that to matter, you have to know the customers. You have to know the market. You have to know the problem space. You have to know some of the technology.
You have to validate like crazy. And
that means that you can't be the technical product manager sitting there in the engineering pods 6 out of 8 hours a day answering developer questions. You have to switch that up. You have to go out and be present in the market and be knowledgeable about your customers and not rely on internal voices. And that's not comfortable for some people. And again, that's where that product owner, product manager split comes in. The people that are technical, that want to be with the developers, let them do that.
Right. We'll let them do it.
Right. Leverage their skills, leverage their interest. And those people that want to be more business oriented, want to be more strategic, want to be more customer facing, let them do that, because they suck at running sprints. They suck at sitting in stand-ups. They suck at that. We don't want people doing things that they're not good at. So I think that's a component. And then also, I think there's still a fundamental lack of understanding about what the role of product is. And this is stupid, because product management has existed since the 1950s, 60s-ish time period, right? At Procter & Gamble, the brand manager. That concept is exactly what we're telling people to do today. It's ebbed and flowed. It's gone more technical. It's gone more business, but it's always been a business role. We just don't want to accept that. And I think we get resistance from marketing and sales sometimes, and even user research, right? That product management is supposed to be the expert on the customer, but marketing talks to more customers, but sales talks to customers every day. But user research does all of this research. All of those are perspectives, and all of those are valid.
Yeah.
All of them are also biased toward whatever objective those particular teams are doing. Product needs to be more, and we're biased too, I won't say we're not, but we need to be less biased in our approach. We need to be more open to taking all of those inputs and creating this product strategy, creating that. And we're seeing a lot of cool technologies that are beginning to allow this with generative AI.
Yes.
Like, there's a lot of vendors out there that are starting to say, hey, we can now look at 5 different sources of data, collect all of that information, and not just give you access to the info, but deliver you an insight. Your top five customers are asking for these types of features, and it could generate this type of revenue.
Yep.
The technology can do that and bring that picture. And then it's up to the product manager, the human in the loop, to say, oh, that looks like a great opportunity.
Right. But then, like, you know, if product is all about continuous improvement and agility, then what I'm hearing from you throughout this conversation is the way that most companies set up their product org and org structure is broken, but they refuse to change it and try something new.
It's funny you said
Weird.
continuous improvement because I don't see that in product teams. I see it a lot in engineering teams, and they model it very well or pretty well.
Yeah.
But when I ask product leaders if they do retrospectives with their teams, it's almost always a dead silence. And I'm like, that is the single most important thing for you to do. Every 2 weeks, once a month, sit down with your product team. What's working? What's not? What can we improve? What do you want to try? Like 4 very basic questions. And
Right.
people say you shouldn't ask those questions. You should play games and that sort of thing. Depends on the team. I'm okay with retro games. They're kind of fun sometimes. But the ultimate goal is, what are we going to do different? Or what are we going to try? Or what are we going to change? And anything that can get you to that point is critical. But product teams aren't doing that. Marketing teams aren't doing it. Sales teams do it in a different way. I actually find it fascinating when I work with our sales teams and find out how much they do talk to each other about hey, what are you doing over there, Darren? Or, hey, Mackenzie, how is this working for you? And sharing those tips and tricks. If we could model our relationships more like a sales team or more like an engineering team, I think product teams could be a lot better at what they do. But we have to be honest about it. And I don't know that people are ready for that level of honesty to say, hey, I'm actually not talking to customers.
Yeah. There's a lot of really good solutions out there for like go-to-market teams, right? For getting insights on how you're behaving in each portion of your job. Like, you have conversational intelligence tools now that will give you the ability to listen to your calls and like look at it as a retrospective and say, what did I do wrong? What did I do right?
A lot of sales training that happens like continuously.
Yeah.
And there's no training for product managers.
Yeah.
Ask any product manager what their onboarding process was like, and they'll tell you, well, I sat down at a desk and I didn't have a laptop the first day. The second day I got a laptop, and then the third day I got access to the tool.
Yep.
That's
it.
Like the hard part for that job is like, how do you track something like that? Because like the product manager's job I'm going to give you my perspective because it's going to be very different from yours and Mackenzie's, right? Based on your backgrounds, but it can be quite abstract depending on the company you're at, right? And so I feel like it can be really hard to sit down and do, we call them like postmortems sometimes. Like after you do something, it's like, okay, what went right? What went wrong? And it's pretty easy because we have very finite deliverables and we have very like specific actions that go into something.
Right.
But product management, it could be, one thing one day, something completely different the next. If you're covering multiple products, it could be a whole different slew of issues. Like I can understand and I like commiserate a little bit with why I think a lot of people aren't doing it because it is, in my opinion, a little bit of abstract.
Yeah, it is. It is, like I said, it's a glue job. It's not a production job. And that's not something that people are used to or understand or even accept. I'm constantly asked by companies like, what are the metrics to measure my product team? And my answer is it's 360-degree reviews. That's it. Like you can look at time to market, time to value. You look at ideation, time frames. How long does it take something to go from idea to delivery? You can look at user story life cycles, all that stuff. None of that is dependent on the product team. Sorry, the product team is dependent on the product. All of that is an input that gets handed off to another team to deliver. And the only thing that I've ever found even remotely useful in assessing whether a product manager is a good product manager is asking the people that they work with how good they are. How good are they at communication? How good are they at responsiveness? How good are they at facilitating meetings, at the things that actually do matter? No other team in a company has that abstract of a remit, right? Marketing has sales, has the lead funnel. Sales has, sales and revenue. Customer support has time to resolve first ticket. Implementation has implementation times. Finance has financial metrics, right? Everyone has fairly clear metrics about how you can say you're doing good, you're doing bad. Engineering, number of bugs revealed after release, different metrics. I have yet to find one metric that makes sense for product that isn't dependent on another team's function. And that's really, really hard. And that is a struggle for teams, product teams to explain why they exist, to defend themselves against budget cuts and things like that. The only other team that's like that, I think, is user experience, because it's a very similar situation. You can't measure how good your user experience team is. You see the results of their work, but it's through the development team, or it's through feedback into marketing and sales. UI, UX teams and product teams, I think one of the reasons why there's so much tension right now between them is we're both very similar, and we're both fighting essentially for survival. And right now, if you look at LinkedIn and you look at social media, it's one or the other. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I think it's both. We need to support each other. Product needs to point to UX and say, this is why UX matters. And UX needs to point to product and say, this is why product matters. And we're both going to do user research, and we're both going to make the product better.
Right.
Yeah, they're dependent upon everybody else to be successful. You're dependent upon sales and marketing to communicate to the market the value and sell it. Dependent upon engineering to actually build it the way you want it, the UX team. So, like, really, you are it's a master collaborator, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the best, I've worked with some really great UX teams that I couldn't put a number on what they were doing and why they were so good. But if you asked me how good they were and asked me specific questions about what they do well, I could totally tell you every single detail of that. And I think that's the hard part for UX and product, especially as budgets cut, especially as money gets tight. We're kind of fighting for our lives in some situations. And I jokingly responded to a comment on LinkedIn the other day. People say, well, we build what the customer tells us. What's so hard about that? That is literally how some people see product. So I think we struggle with that. We need to have the right people in leadership roles to be able to advocate for us. And we need to take that fight on ourselves. And we need to say, if it weren't for us, this, or this wouldn't have happened. Or educate people on opportunity costs, educate people on zero-sum games, because product development is a zero-sum game. If we choose to do one thing, we're not doing another. If we devote our resources to one aspect of product development, let's say maintenance or bug fixes, those are people that can't work on something else. This isn't a matrixed organization where we pick and pull people on a daily basis to do different things. We're stuck with the resources that we have. That's why it's not a time scope resource pyramid. It's a time and scope line spectrum.
Right. Yeah, 100%. It's a very interesting profession, and it is a lot of helping other parts of the organization really understand what we do, or how you put it, what our remit is. And yeah, we are in such an interesting time that it's very much like, show us the impact, and show us the ROI of this team. And I hope that we can move away from, just the thought of product as a cost center, because
Yes.
that is the thing. That is the thing. Whether it's a public company, or VC backed, or a small startup, right? It's often seen as a cost center. So I guess, like, my final question to you, Clifton, is like, if we could sort of break free of this cycle, and, like, get to a point where product management is clear, or get to a point where people are constantly rethinking, is this how our org should be set up? Is this how product should work, right? Like, what would be the one thing that you would recommend?
That's a really tough question, because one thing, I'm not good at one things, as you know, Mackenzie.
You can have two, Cliff.
Okay, two. I think one is really embracing being the voice of the customer, and the customer expert and the market expert. Marketing is an expert for another reason, but for us as product teams, is really embracing that expertise role and sharing that expertise with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly development teams, particularly testing teams, so that they can understand that what they're doing has real world impacts, and that they can own some of that. I'm big on empowerment and ownership, and I think the more information we give those teams, the better off we are, and the fewer discussions we have to have about why someone made a dumb choice instead of a smart choice.
Yep.
I think the second piece, and that's kind of downward facing. I think upward facing we need to be our own best advocates. We need to explain and show how the process works, why decisions are being made, and why we're making the trade-offs that we are. All too often, we go in and we show a roadmap and we just go, hey, this is the roadmap that I created. Yeah, those 5 things that you asked for, they're nowhere to be seen on here, and I'm not going to tell you why. Right? We need to show people that, okay, here, it's messy, it's tough, right? This job is hard. One of the things that I did at a company a few years ago is we actually brought marketing, sales, implementation, support, and dev into our roadmap reviews. And what we did was we presented it as here's the roadmap as of today. And we did these once a month or so. Here's what it looked like before, and here's what's changed.
Yep.
How does this affect you? We weren't arguing the roadmap. The roadmap was done, and there were changes and there were adjustments, and we could explain why those happened. And sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. But the outcome wasn't, we need to change that back. The outcome was, hey, sales, what does this mean for you?
Yep.
Right. And one time we had marketing go, wait, that's slipping by a month. We have an event. And I was like, okay, cool. You've got an event. What do you need? I'm like, well, we need a demo. I'm like, okay, how functional does that demo have to be?
Yep.
And the answer was, oh, we just need to click through it in a 5-minute conversation with customers. I'm like, awesome. We will have a mock that works for these specific use cases. We'll tell you which buttons to click. It will show you what you need to show. And having that transparency, having people see how hard the job can be, really shows the value, right?
Yeah.
If we're a facilitator, we need to show people we facilitate. If we're a coalition builder, we need to show people that we're building those coalitions.
Yeah.
The biggest mistake I ever made in my career was getting the trains running on time without showing the CEO how difficult that was. Because literally, my boss left and I didn't get that job because he didn't think I was working hard. Because everything was going great, right? And that's the problem with product management, is when we do our best job, we disappear.
Yeah.
And that's good. I mean, in a way, that's really good, right? Everything's flowing, everything's going great. We're getting stuff to market quickly. We're hitting customer value. We're hitting retention metrics. We're hitting all the numbers. But underneath that is a ton of work that if you don't advocate for, if you don't show people, it's just going to disappear and everyone's going to think this is just how it should have been.
100%. I think those are 2 excellent pieces of advice. And Clifton, before we close out, how can people get in touch with you if they want to, do you have like a blog that people can follow maybe, or LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best way to get in touch with me. Feel free to follow me. I try to post roughly once a week. Sometimes I'm good at that. Sometimes I'm horrible at it. Other than that, you can reach out to Gartner. Gartner has offerings for companies of all shapes and sizes. What most people don't know is we're not just about technology, markets, and industries. Like, my job is not being an expert on a market. My job is being an expert on product management.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I help people do. So I think, reach out on LinkedIn. I'm a pretty open follower. So if you follow me or you ask to be added to my network, it'll probably happen. And engage, right? I mean, I'm thinking of the Lore podcast where he says, say hi. I love it when people say hi. I honestly do. I like it when people say hi. Hey, I heard about this. I heard you on this podcast. I don't agree with your ideas. Like, I'm not the be all end all guru. I could be wrong on some things. It's happened occasionally in the past. And sometimes I own it and sometimes I don't, but just like any human being. Reach out on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to find me.
You heard it here first. Reach out to Clifton if you disagree. Get invited to Clifton online. Clifton, it's been really wonderful having you. Thank you so much for popping by the Ops Drop.
Yeah, thanks for having me on
Thank you,
here, guys.
Clifton.
Love it.